The worst decisions don't feel dangerous when you make them. They feel necessary. The rain tapped softly against my apartment window as I sat at the kitchen table grading spelling tests from my third-grade class. Outside, Boston was wrapped in a cold November fog, the streetlights glowing like distant stars through the mist. Inside, the old radiator hissed and clicked, fighting a losing battle against the chill creeping through the walls. I checked the time on my phone. 10:47 p.m. Another late night. Another stack of papers. Another reminder that being a teacher meant taking your work home, whether you wanted to or not. I rubbed my tired eyes and reached for my coffee, only to grimace when I realized it had gone cold nearly an hour ago. My life wasn't exciting. No luxury vacations. No designer clothes. No dramatic love stories. Just lesson plans, overdue bills, and a one-bedroom apartment that seemed to shrink a little more every year. Honestly, I was okay with that. Stability felt underrated these days. My phone buzzed against the table. Dad. I smiled despite myself and answered immediately. You're up late, I said. Silence greeted me. Not complete silence. Breathing. Heavy breathing. Uneven. My smile faded. Dad. More silence. Then a voice I didn't recognize. Male. Calm. Controlled. Emma Carter? Every muscle in my body tightened. Who is this? I asked. The man ignored the question. Your father is safe. The word safe did not make me feel safe. If anything, it made my stomach drop. People only said someone was safe when there was a reason to believe they weren't. I stood from the table so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Put my father on the phone. A brief pause followed. Then the stranger spoke again. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, Romano Tower. Ask for Damian Romano. The name meant nothing to me. At least, it didn't at first. Then something cold slid down my spine. Everybody in Boston knew the name. Maybe not officially. Maybe not openly. But everyone knew it. Romano Industries. Romano Holdings. Romano Charities. An empire worth billions. The kind of family that appeared in magazines and donated entire wings to hospitals. The kind of family powerful enough to make headlines disappear. My pulse hammered in my ears. Why does Damian Romano have my father? Another pause. Longer this time. Tomorrow, the man repeated. The call ended. I stared at my phone. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't think. The rain outside seemed louder now. The apartment darker. Smaller. Wrong somehow. I immediately called my father back. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. By midnight, I had called 23 times. By 1 in the morning, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Every terrible possibility fought for space inside my head. My father wasn't perfect. Far from it. He'd spent years bouncing between failed businesses and bad financial decisions. But he was still my father. The man who taught me how to ride a bike. The man who packed my school lunches. The man who cried harder than I did at my college graduation. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally dragged me into a restless sleep. When my alarm rang at 7, it felt like I'd closed my eyes for 5 minutes. The sky outside was gray. The city wet from overnight rain. And deep inside my chest sat a feeling I couldn't explain. A feeling that my life was about to split into 2 parts. The part before I walked into Romano Tower. And everything that came after. By 8:45, I was standing across the street from Romano Tower, wondering if walking away would make any difference. The building rose nearly 50 stories into the gray morning sky, all glass and steel and impossible wealth. People in tailored coats moved through the revolving doors carrying coffee cups and briefcases that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Everything about the place felt untouchable, powerful, permanent. And somehow, I was supposed to walk inside and ask for a man whose name made my stomach tighten every time I thought about it. I crossed the street before I could lose my nerve. The lobby looked more like a luxury hotel than a corporate headquarters. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers overhead. Fresh white orchids decorated every corner. Even the air smelled expensive. A woman behind the reception desk looked up as I approached. Her professional smile never wavered. May I help you? I am here to see Damian Romano. The change was subtle, barely noticeable, but I saw it. The careful look in her eyes. The slight pause before she answered. Of course, Miss Carter. They are expecting you. Expecting me. The words sent another wave of unease through my chest. I had never called ahead. Nobody should have known I was coming. Yet somehow they did. A man in a dark suit appeared beside me almost instantly. "This way, Miss Carter." I followed him toward a private elevator at the far end of the lobby. The ride to the top floor felt endless. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls. Pale face, nervous eyes, teacher's salary wardrobe. I looked completely out of place. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into silence. Not the normal silence of an office. A different kind. Controlled. Intentional. The kind of silence that made every footstep sound louder. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The harbor shimmered beneath the clouds. Cars below looked like tiny toys moving through narrow streets. Somewhere beyond those buildings was my apartment. My classroom. My normal life. It already felt far away. The suited man stopped in front of large double doors. "He will see you now." Then he walked away. Just like that. Leaving me alone. My pulse pounded as I pushed the doors open. The office was enormous. Sunlight spilled across dark hardwood floors. Bookshelves lined one wall. Modern artwork filled another. Behind a massive desk sat a man reading a document. For several seconds, he did not look up. The room seemed to bend around him. Not because he was physically intimidating. Because of the certainty he carried. The absolute confidence. The feeling that everything inside those walls existed because he allowed it. Finally, he lifted his eyes. Green. Cold. Sharp enough to stop me where I stood. Damian Romano looked younger than I expected. Maybe 34. Dark hair. Impeccably dressed. Every detail controlled. Every expression measured. He studied me without speaking. Like he was comparing me to something only he could see. "Emma Carter," he said quietly. "Please sit." I remained standing. "Where is my father?" His expression never changed. He closed the document in front of him and folded his hands together. "Your father is alive." Relief hit me so suddenly I nearly lost my balance. But it lasted less than a second. Because Damian Romano's eyes never softened. Not even slightly. "What do you want from him?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "My arrangement is with you." The room suddenly felt smaller. Colder. Dangerous in a way I could not explain. Damian reached into a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. Then he slid it forward. "Read the first page." My fingers trembled as I opened it. The words blurred at first. Then my breath caught. "Marriage agreement. 1 year." I stared at the page. Certain I had misunderstood. Certain this had to be some kind of mistake. Slowly, I looked back up at him. Damian Romano held my gaze without blinking. "Marry me for 1 year," he said calmly. "And your father walks away from every problem he has created." I stared at the contract until the words stopped looking like words. Marriage. 1 year. The black letters sat on the page with impossible certainty, as if this were the most normal proposal in the world. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston continued moving without me. Cars crossed intersections. Ferries drifted across the harbor. Somewhere people were ordering coffee and checking emails and complaining about traffic. Meanwhile, my entire life had just tilted sideways. "This is a joke," I said finally. Damian Romano did not smile. No. His voice remained calm, controlled, almost polite. Somehow that made it worse. "You cannot be serious." "I assure you, Miss Carter, I am." I pushed the folder away as if touching it any longer might make it real. "You have my father, you call me here, and now you expect me to marry a complete stranger? I expect you to consider your options carefully." Anger cut through my fear. Sharp. Immediate. My options. I stood so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. "You think this is a choice?" For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt. Not sympathy. Something harder to identify. Then it vanished. "Sit down, Emma." The way he said my name sent a strange chill through me. Like he had practiced it before I arrived. I stayed standing. "Tell me where my father is." Damian leaned back slightly in his chair. "Your father made a series of financial decisions that created significant problems." "Then talk to him." "I did." "Then this has nothing to do with me." Silence settled between us. Heavy and uncomfortable. Damian's gaze remained fixed on mine. He never looked away. Never shifted. People usually glanced down eventually. Checked their phones. Looked toward a window. Damian Romano seemed incapable of distraction. "Everything has to do with you," he said quietly. I hated how those words landed. Hated the certainty behind them. "Why?" I demanded. "Why me?" Another pause. Then he stood. At 6'3", he felt even larger than before. Not because of his height. Because of the space he occupied, the confidence, the complete absence of hesitation. He walked toward the windows overlooking the city. His reflection appeared against the glass. Dark suit, straight posture, a man completely at home with power. Because this arrangement benefits both of us. I laughed once, bitterly. I fail to see the benefit. Your father receives a clean slate, and you receive a wife. For 1 year. That is still a wife. Damien turned toward me. His expression remained unreadable. There will be no unreasonable expectations. You will continue teaching. Continue your normal life. You will have complete financial security. At the end of 12 months, the marriage ends. It sounded rehearsed, like he had repeated the speech many times in his head. Why would anyone agree to this? I asked. For the first time since entering the office, Damien hesitated. The pause lasted only a second, but I noticed it. Then his answer came. Because some people understand sacrifice. The words hit harder than they should have. Images of my father flashed through my mind. His tired smile. His voicemail greeting. The unanswered calls from last night. I hated that Damien knew exactly where my thoughts would go. He walked back to the desk and slid a single photograph toward me. My breath caught instantly. Dad sat at a small table, holding a cup of coffee. He looked healthy, safe, alive. The photograph had clearly been taken that morning. Relief flooded through me so fast it hurt. But beneath the relief came something darker. Because Damien had known exactly what that picture would do. Exactly how it would weaken my resolve. I looked up slowly. Damien's eyes never left mine. You have 48 hours, he said. After that, the offer disappears. Then he opened another file on his desk, as if our conversation were already over. I should have walked out immediately. I should have refused. Instead, I found myself staring at the photograph in my trembling hands. And for the first time since entering Romano Tower, I realized I was not asking whether I wanted to sign the contract. I was asking how much I was willing to sacrifice for the people I loved. 48 hours felt like 48 seconds. I spent the first day calling my father over and over again. Every call went unanswered. Every message disappeared into silence. By the second night, exhaustion settled into my bones like cold rain. I sat alone in my apartment staring at the photograph Damien had given me. Dad looked safe, calm, comfortable. The picture should have reassured me. Instead, it haunted me. Because every time I looked at it, I heard Damien's voice. Marry me for 1 year. At 6:30 the next evening, I signed the contract. The pen felt heavier than it should have. My hand trembled as my signature appeared on the final page. Emma Carter. 3 simple words changed the direction of my entire life. Damien watched quietly from across the conference table. No smile. No celebration. No sign of victory. Just that same unreadable expression that never seemed to change. Your father will be released from all obligations immediately, he said. I hated how relieved those words made me feel. The following morning, a black car arrived outside my apartment building. I stood on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and a feeling I could not name. Fear, regret, disbelief. Maybe all 3. The driver loaded my bags without speaking. 20 minutes later, the city disappeared behind us. Trees replaced buildings. Quiet roads replaced traffic. Then the gates appeared. Massive wrought iron gates opened slowly as the car approached. Beyond them stood a property, so large it looked unreal. The house was less a house and more a private estate. Stone walls, tall windows, perfectly manicured gardens stretching across acres of land. I had spent my entire life around ordinary things. Ordinary homes, ordinary neighborhoods, ordinary people. Nothing about this place felt ordinary. A woman greeted me at the front entrance. Welcome, Miss Carter. I am Margaret. She looked to be in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone seemed genuinely warm. Damien is not here. I asked before I could stop myself. Mr. Romano is attending meetings in New York today. The answer surprised me more than it should have. Part of me expected him to be waiting inside, like some king receiving a prisoner. Instead, he was gone. The realization brought an unexpected sense of relief. Margaret showed me through hallways larger than my entire apartment. Every room looked like something from an architectural magazine. Expensive without appearing flashy. Elegant without trying too hard. Nothing felt accidental. Every detail had been chosen carefully. Eventually, she stopped in front of a set of double doors. This will be your room. Room, not bedroom. Room felt too small a word for what waited beyond those doors. The space contained a sitting area, a fireplace, a private balcony, and windows overlooking a lake that shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. I should have been impressed. Instead, I felt trapped. Luxury was still a cage if you could not leave. After Margaret departed, I wandered through the unfamiliar space. The silence felt enormous. Lonely. I opened drawers. Examined bookshelves. Anything to distract myself from the reality settling around me. Then I noticed a closed cabinet beside the fireplace. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside sat a single framed photograph. The breath caught in my throat instantly. The woman smiling back at me looked startlingly familiar. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Similar height. Similar features. Similar smile. My pulse quickened as I stared at the image. She looked so much like me that for a second I wondered if I was losing my mind. Then I noticed the date engraved on the silver frame. 5 years earlier. Beneath it were 3 simple words. Forever yours, Sophia. And suddenly I understood one terrifying thing. Damien Romano had not chosen me by accident. That night, sleep refused to come. The photograph sat on the nightstand beside the bed, and no matter how many times I turned away from it, my eyes found their way back. Sophia. Forever yours. The words echoed through my head long after midnight. By morning, the lake outside my window was covered in silver mist. Everything looked peaceful, beautiful even. But beauty felt deceptive now. I dressed and made my way downstairs, determined to learn something, anything, about the life I had stepped into. The estate seemed quieter in daylight. Staff moved through the halls with practiced efficiency. Nobody lingered. Nobody gossiped. It was as if the entire house operated according to rules I had not been given. Margaret greeted me in the dining room with coffee and breakfast. "Did you sleep well?" she asked gently. I almost laughed. Instead, I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Who was Sophia? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Margaret froze for the briefest moment. Not long enough for most people to notice. Long enough for me. She lowered her eyes. "I do not think it is my place to discuss that." My stomach tightened. "Then there is something to discuss." Before she could answer, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Every conversation in the room seemed to stop at once. I looked toward the doorway and saw Damien enter. For a second, neither of us spoke. He wore a charcoal suit without a wrinkle anywhere. His dark hair was slightly damp from the morning rain. The image was so polished it felt unreal. Yet the moment his eyes found mine, something shifted. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly, like he had remembered something unpleasant or painful. "Good morning, Emma." His voice remained calm. Controlled. Always controlled. "Good morning." He sat across from me and opened a tablet filled with reports. For several minutes, silence stretched between us. I could feel the unanswered questions pressing against my ribs. Finally, I pushed the photograph across the table. I had carried it downstairs hidden inside a folder. Damien looked at it once. That was all. Once. Yet every trace of color disappeared from his face. The room became perfectly still. "Who is she?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Where did you find that?" "In my room." A muscle moved beneath his cheek. "It should not have been there." "That is not an answer." His gaze lifted slowly. For the first time since meeting him, I saw something other than control. Not anger. Not arrogance. Grief. Deep and old and carefully buried. The sight caught me completely off guard. "Her name was Sophia," he said quietly. "Was. Not as. Was." My chest tightened. "And she looks like me." Damien looked away first. The movement was so unexpected that it startled me. "Yes." Just one word. Yet somehow it confirmed every fear growing inside me. I stared at him across the massive dining table. Suddenly the contract made sense in a way it never had before. The urgency. The arrangement. The strange way he studied me. None of it had been random. None of it had been coincidence. "You did not choose me because of my father," I whispered. Damien remained silent. Silence was answer enough. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the windows. Inside, the truth settled between us like a shadow. And for the first time since signing the contract, I realized there was a secret buried beneath this marriage that was far bigger than anything I had imagined. The truth changed everything, but it did not change the fact that I was still trapped inside the same house. For the next several days, I avoided Damien whenever possible. Breakfast became room service. Dinners became excuses. If I heard his footsteps in the hallway, I turned in the opposite direction. Part of me was angry. Another part was embarrassed by how deeply his deception had affected me. Most of all, I hated feeling like a replacement. Like someone had looked at my face and seen another woman's reflection. The estate settled into a strange routine. Every morning, a car drove me into Boston so I could continue teaching. Every afternoon, it brought me back. The children in my classroom remained blissfully unaware that their teacher now lived behind private gates with one of the most powerful men in the city. Their questions about spelling tests and science projects felt like tiny lifelines connecting me to my old world. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I stayed late helping a student prepare for a reading competition. By the time I left the school, darkness had already settled over the city. The storm outside had intensified. Rain hammered against the sidewalks and turned the streets into rivers of reflected light. I climbed into the waiting car, exhausted. When we arrived at the estate 40 minutes later, I stepped out into the downpour and immediately realized something was wrong. The lights near the front entrance were dark. Several staff members stood outside looking concerned. What happened? I asked Margaret as I hurried toward the house. A transformer failed during the storm, she explained. Most of the main wing lost power. Inside, the mansion felt completely different. Without its usual lighting, the enormous rooms seemed quieter, less intimidating, almost human. Candles flickered along hallways, casting soft golden shadows across the walls. As I walked toward the staircase, I heard music. Piano music. Slow, beautiful, unexpected. The sound drifted from a room near the back of the house. Curiosity pulled me forward before common sense could stop me. The door stood partially open. Through the narrow gap, I saw Damien sitting alone at a grand piano. His suit jacket rested on a nearby chair. His sleeves were rolled neatly to his forearms. Candlelight danced across the polished black surface as his fingers moved across the keys. I froze. Everything about the scene felt impossible. This was not the man I knew. Not the controlled businessman who negotiated contracts like chess moves. Not the cold strategist who had changed my life with a single signature. This man looked tired, quiet, lonely. For several seconds, I simply listened. Then a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. The music stopped instantly. Damien looked up. Our eyes met across the room. I did not know you played, I said softly. A faint smile touched his lips. The first genuine smile I had ever seen from him. It transformed his entire face. There are many things you do not know about me, Emma. The way he said my name felt different this time. Gentler. Not calculated. Not rehearsed. Just my name. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped against the windows. Candlelight flickered between us. Then Damien looked down at the piano keys and quietly said, Sophia hated this song. My breath caught. He had never spoken about her before. Not willingly. And suddenly, for the first time since entering his world, I realized he might be carrying wounds far deeper than the ones he had caused me. For a while, things became easier in ways I never expected. Not perfect. Never perfect. But different. Damien stopped treating me like an obligation written into a contract. We began having breakfast together occasionally. Sometimes dinner. Sometimes conversations that lasted longer than either of us intended. He asked about my students. I learned which books he reread when he could not sleep. The distance between us slowly narrowed until I stopped counting the days remaining on our agreement. That realization should have frightened me. Instead, it felt dangerous in a completely different way. One Saturday morning, I returned from a school fundraiser earlier than expected. The estate seemed unusually quiet. Most of the staff were preparing for a charity event Damien planned to attend that evening. I headed toward the library, hoping to find a book and escape the growing confusion inside my own heart. That was when I heard voices. The library door was partially open. Two men stood inside speaking in low tones. One of them was Damien's attorney, a man named Richard Hayes. The other worked in Damien's security division. I would have walked away immediately. I should have. Then I heard my name. Everything inside me froze. She still does not know? Richard asked. No, the other man replied. Mr. Romano ordered complete discretion. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The investigation files remained secured. Investigation. Files. My pulse began to quicken. Richard sighed. 3 years of surveillance was excessive. The words hit me so hard I nearly stumbled backward. 3 years. Surveillance. I could barely breathe. It was necessary, the other man said. After he saw the photograph. Silence followed. Then Richard spoke again. Finding someone who looked that similar was always going to create complications. The room seemed to tilt around me. I stepped away from the door before they could see me. My legs carried me down the hallway on pure instinct. 3 years. The number repeated inside my head over and over. 3 years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. By the time I reached my room, my hands were shaking. I opened drawers, closets, cabinets. I did not even know what I was searching for until I found it. A locked desk in Damien's private study. The key sat hidden beneath a leather notebook. I told myself to stop. Told myself to leave. Instead, I opened the drawer. Inside sat a thick folder labeled simply, Emma Carter. My stomach dropped. The first page contained photographs. Me leaving work. Me entering coffee shops. Me walking through a bookstore. Me carrying groceries into my apartment. Dozens of photographs. Hundreds. Reports followed. Background checks. Employment records. Medical history. College transcripts. Every detail of my life carefully documented. Every private moment reduced to information on a page. Then I found the final report. The date sat at the top. For months before my father's financial problems began. For months before Damien first contacted me. For months before the contract. My vision blurred. This had never been about helping my father. That had simply been the opportunity. The excuse. The truth was worse. Damien had chosen me long before any debt existed. Long before I knew his name. I sank into the chair, unable to look away from the pages scattered before me. The man I had slowly started trusting had built our entire relationship on secrets. And as tears filled my eyes, one terrible question echoed through the silence. If Damien had spent years searching for someone who looked like Sophia, had he ever truly seen me at all? The confrontation happened that night. I did not plan it. I did not rehearse what I would say. The anger simply carried me forward until I found myself standing inside Damien's office with the investigation file clenched in my hands. He looked up from his desk the moment I entered. For a second, his expression softened the way it sometimes did when he saw me. Then he noticed the folder. Every trace of warmth vanished. Silence stretched between us. Heavy, sharp, dangerous. I dropped the file onto the desk. Papers spilled across the polished wood surface. Photographs scattered everywhere. Images of my life. My routines. My private moments. Damien stared at them without speaking. Tell me I am wrong, I whispered. My voice shook despite my best efforts. Tell me none of this is real. He remained silent. That hurt more than any explanation could have. 3 years? I asked. 3 years. His jaw tightened. Emma, do not. I stepped backward before he could move closer. Do not say my name like everything is normal. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind him. The same rain that had followed us through so many moments. Somehow tonight it sounded colder. I can explain. I laughed once. The sound broke halfway through. You investigated me. You followed me. You built a file on me before I even knew you existed. Damien closed his eyes briefly. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely exhausted. You deserve the truth. I deserved the truth from the beginning. The words echoed through the room. Damien looked away first. You are right. The admission stunned me. No defense. No excuse. Just acceptance. Somehow that made everything worse. Tears blurred my vision. Was any of it real? The question escaped before I could stop it. Damien froze. What? The breakfasts. The conversations. The piano. Any of it. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he answered quietly. Yes. I wanted to believe him. That was the problem. A part of me still wanted to believe him. I cannot do this anymore. The words felt like shattered glass leaving my throat. Damien's face changed instantly. Emma, I cannot spend another day wondering whether you see me or her. Something raw flashed through his eyes. Real pain. Not the carefully controlled emotions he usually showed the world. You are not Sophia. Then why did you choose me? Silence answered before he could. We both knew the truth. I turned and walked out before he could say anything else. The next morning, I left the estate. No dramatic goodbye. No argument. Just 2 suitcases loaded into a taxi before sunrise. Margaret cried when she hugged me. I nearly did too. Boston felt different when I returned. Smaller somehow. Familiar in ways I had once taken for granted. My apartment was exactly as I remembered. The same creaking floors. The same tiny kitchen. The same view of the brick building next door. Yet it felt strangely empty. Days passed. Then weeks. I buried myself in work. lesson plans, parent conferences, reading assignments, anything that kept my mind occupied. But grief has a way of finding space, no matter how busy you become. Some nights I caught myself reaching for my phone before remembering there would be no message waiting. No unexpected conversation over breakfast. No piano music drifting through dark hallways. Then one rainy evening, I opened my mailbox and found a large envelope waiting inside. My heart stopped the moment I recognized the handwriting. Damian Romano. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside sat a single document. Divorce papers. Signed. And attached to the final page was a handwritten note that contained only 6 words. You deserve the truth. I am sorry. Some people think heartbreak arrives like a storm. Loud. Violent. Impossible to ignore. They are wrong. Real heartbreak arrives quietly. It sits beside you while you grade papers. It follows you through grocery stores. It waits in empty apartments and silent mornings. 3 months passed after the divorce papers arrived. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. My students grew excited about summer vacation. The trees outside my classroom filled with new leaves. Life moved forward exactly the way it was supposed to. Yet some part of me remained stuck in the space between goodbye and acceptance. I never saw Damian's name in the news anymore. Romano Industries continued operating, but the charity galas, magazine interviews, and public appearances seemed to disappear. At first I assumed I was imagining it. Then one afternoon, my father called. Have you spoken to him? He asked unexpectedly. My heart stumbled. No. Silence stretched across the line. Emma, do you know what he did? What are you talking about? My father exhaled slowly. He sold half his voting shares. I frowned. Even I knew how unusual that sounded. Why? Another pause. People are saying he is stepping away from the business. After the call ended, I sat at my desk staring out the classroom window. Damian had spent his entire life building an empire. The idea of him walking away from it felt impossible. Yet something inside me whispered that maybe it was true. 2 weeks later, the school hosted its annual spring fundraiser. Parents filled the gymnasium. Children displayed art projects and science exhibits. The evening felt ordinary until I noticed a familiar figure standing near the back wall. For a moment, I thought I was imagining him. Damian looked different. Not physically. The same dark hair. The same green eyes. The same quiet presence that drew attention without demanding it. But something had changed. The armor was gone. The constant tension. The invisible wall he carried everywhere. He stood alone holding a small donation envelope while children ran past him laughing. My pulse hammered in my chest. Neither of us moved at first. Then slowly, he walked toward me. Hello, Emma. His voice sounded softer than I remembered. I swallowed hard. Hello, Damian. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The noise of the fundraiser faded into the background. Finally, I looked at him. Really looked at him. Why are you here? A faint smile touched his face. Your students invited me. I blinked. My students. He nodded toward a table displaying handmade thank you cards. Several featured his company's name beneath donations made anonymously over the past few months. You funded the reading program. It seemed important. I stared at him. The old Damian would have attached his name to every contribution. This one had not. Why did you sign the papers? I asked. Quietly. The question lingered between us. Damian looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. Because loving someone means giving them the freedom to leave. Emotion tightened my throat. And the business? Another small smile. It turns out there are more important things than power. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Damian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. Not Sophia. Not the past. It was a picture of my 3rd grade class standing in front of their reading project display. He handed it to me carefully. That is the life you built, he said. Not because of me. Not because of anyone else. Because of who you are. My eyes filled with tears. This time he did not step closer. Did not pressure. Did not ask for anything. He simply stood there. Waiting. Respecting the choice he should have given me from the beginning. And in that moment, I finally understood something. The man who forced his way into my life was gone. Standing before me was someone entirely different. Someone who had learned that hearts cannot be won through contracts, secrets, or control. Only honesty. Only patience. Only love. And for the first time since everything began, I smiled back.